Alright, put the emergency brake on and let's take off the front passenger side wheel. And let the car back down on jack stands. Let's crawl back up under the car, make absolutely certain that the leak is coming from the water pump. You don't want to do all this if it's just some kind of hose or some kind of connection somewhere. And as we can see when we take a really good look, that leak is positively coming from the water pump. So now we're good to go. We need to take this pulley off, but before we do that, we need to take this rock shield out and we need to disconnect the battery. And now we get a much better look at the water pump, and we can confirm it even more that the leak is coming from the water pump. We have to take this pulley off, and there's 3 bolts holding it on. You want to loosen these bolts, not take them all the way off, just loosen them while the belt is on, and that will keep the pulley from turning. Yeah, on these pulley bolts, I found out that a 1/2 inch fits better than 13 millimeter, and they're not 12 millimeter. They're not 14 mil. So I don't know. I can tell that this is an aftermarket water pump that someone changed out somewhere along the line. It's kind of odd to see 1/2 inch bolts on a Chrysler because most of these cars are 100% metric. There's a real thin 1/2 inch wrench that might come in handy. I just don't want to use an open end on it, you know? Unless, yeah, they're actually not too tight. So just like loosen them all up and then we'll take the belt off because the belt is stopping the pulley from turning. So once the belt is off, we can just spin the pulley around and take the, take them all the way off. There's actually only 3 bolts on this pulley. So far, it's pretty good. This pulley is not going to come all the way off the water pump. It's going to get wedged right in there, between the actual water pump and the frame. So as I was hoping, the pulley is really not that tight. So once these are hand loose, we can go ahead and disconnect the belt. This belt tool, once you get it in there, you can put this ratchet wrench right at the other end. 3/8 of an inch ratchet wrench goes right in there. And then we can take this belt off. There you go. One. These are just little bolts. The neck's getting stiff. Alright, but now we can access. Actually, we should have moved this somewhere else. So So there's one right there, and I think these are just 10 millimeter. And I think there's 5 of them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And that one back there is going to be a little bit difficult to get to. And I think the rest of these we're going to need a wrench on. Actually, we can't even get to that one. I think we can get to this one. I'll try the short side. So you could probably see as we started loosening up that water pump, more and more water started dripping out. So now we're going to take all the water out of the radiator and actually the engine itself, so we don't get a face full of water when we go ahead and take this water pump all the way off. You have to take the hose off the water pump anyway, just to take it off there. So I think I'm just going to disconnect it from the radiator and see if we can get most of it out of there. All I'm doing is removing this tube right here. So I'll disconnect it from the radiator hose right there, and that goes straight into the water pump. And it's held in with a little round seal going around the edge of it. So once you get the bolt loose, just go ahead and yank it off. The bolts connecting that tube to the water pump and to the bracket that holds it in place are 13 millimeter, and there they are right there. And that came from here, this tube going into the radiator, and there's another one up here. Check the seal on this when you take it off. This one's still, as far as I can tell, it looks pretty damn good. And now for another brand new installment of Bless Your Heart, It's a Chrysler. Peace be with you, brothers and sisters. This job is very apt to make you wish you never turned a wrench in your life. Alright, this is basically the way that your water pump connects to the side of your engine block. When these go out, they start leaking. And there's a little hole right here inside this chamber here that lets that water out. When they go bad, and the seal inside the water pump goes bad, and water comes out here and it fills up this chamber and it drips down and it stands on this bolt right here. So it's very, very common when you go to take these off to loosen these up, and these get stuck, and people keep turning them and they break off inside the engine block. If that happens, you got a lot of problems, and you're going to have to go in from the back of the engine block, and there's a little flange on the engine that hangs down that this connects to. And you're going to have to drill the broken bolt out of the back of the engine block. If one of these breaks, you're in worse trouble, because now you're going to have to take the car off the engine. That's how it's done on this Chrysler. You unbolt everything and you lift the car up off the engine. So, and the reason this is common is because these are very thin, cheap little bolts, and they rust really easily. And because we're dealing with a water pump, we have water rusting out these bolts, and people let them go too long and they get too rusty, and as soon as they turn them, they crack right off. You're going to be in trouble if that happens. This is the easiest one to get to. The rest of them get tougher and tougher, and I think 2 of them are impossible to get from the back of the engine block. So now you're going to have towing charges to tow it to a shop, to use a lift to get that engine out, and then let them drill it out. And it's going to be very expensive and just a great big hassle. Now, sometimes you can get the water pump out. You always be able to get the water pump out, and the broken bolts are still in there. You can't put the new one in until you get them out. And sometimes there'll be a little piece of the bolt sticking out that you can maneuver a pair of vice grips onto the end of and twist it. But because they're so fragile and rusty and they're stuck in the engine, and the tip's usually just gonna break off. Sometimes you can get lucky. Sometimes you can heat it up with an oxyacetylene torch to make it just super hot and just, pop it through to the other end. It's just a great big hassle, and what a 6-7 hour job turns into a week-long expensive fiasco. Be careful. Here's how you want to do it. If you're taking one of these off and they lock up on you and they start getting tighter instead of looser, stop at that point and twist it in just a hair, and then put some penetrating lube into it and let it sit for an hour. Come back and twist it. Try to twist it off a little bit more. If it locks up again, twist it back in just a hair, lube it up again, let it sit for another hour. And you're just going to have to keep repeating that process very slowly. You don't want to twist it until it starts heating up. It's going to break really easy, just like a toothpick. That's your biggest fear with this whole job, guys. You really, really got to be careful with this. Just tiny little things. Move one actually all the way out. I want it to keep yanking it out while I got a hand on it. And I gotta find the other ones back there. Alright, I'm not going to put the extraction of this broken bolt into this video. That's a whole different specialty subject for a whole different video. And it would make this video too long, and this video is already long enough. I will urge you one more time, do not do what I just did. It's going to turn into a nightmare, and if you're doing this for money, you're going to lose money. The other one's the same way. It's not getting any looser. I don't want to break that one out either. It'll be easier to work on once this is out. So the first thing I do when I take this off is get that broken bolt out and try to find another one to replace it and just grease it up real good. You can see where it was all rusting away. Alright, it fell down there. And here we have another.
Bless your heart, it's a Chrysler.
The reason I waited this long to drop the engine was to prove to some of you naysayers who like to go around leaving nasty comments contradicting the creator that you have a better way and you don't have to do all that. And I know I'm going to get some of that here. But the fact of the matter is, yes, you do have to drop the engine. There's absolutely no way, I don't care how you maneuver, you can't even get the water pump out of the hole where it sits in. You can't even pull it out without it hitting that piece of, the foundation of the car. You do have to drop the engine. The good news about that is it's really pretty easy, man. I mean, it's really basic. It sounds difficult, but you only have to drop it, I don't know, an inch and a half, and you're good to go. It'll just fall right out of there. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do now, and you're going to be surprised at how easy this is. It's 3 bolts. And you need some kind of jack stand to put up under the engine. Or not jack stand, a hydraulic jack. Or a scissor jack would work too. Let's get to it.
Chrysler, engineered to drive mechanics crazy.
Remove the air channel just to give yourself more room to that passenger side motor mount. And there's a little wire connector back of this, and this will send a signal to your computer that check engine, and that's usually what this is if your air filter's getting clogged up. If that's happening, you might want to take a good look at that air filter. And now we get to see the top of that motor mount. Those 3 bolts are what you have to loosen up. But before you do that, you have to put a jack supporting that engine up under there. You're actually, when we loosen these up, you're actually going to see the motor come up a little bit. And then we'll be able to jack it down and lower the engine from where it was, roughly an inch and a half. And that way that water pump will drop right out of there. Now you don't have to put a ton of pressure onto the bottom of this motor. You're just kind of keeping it in place and keeping it from dropping all the way down. So you're just supporting it. Now put a little bit of pressure on it. You want to see the engine move up a little bit when you loosen those motor mounts, but just a little. You're not trying to lift the car off the ground. Now these are 15mm bolts holding this motor mount, and this is a dreadful camera angle because I forgot to pull the camera back up and show you what I was doing. But you can kind of tell that I'm loosening up those motor mount bolts. You don't want to loosen up all the way one at a time. You just want to do a little bit on each one. And here you can see the ones on the side are all the way out. The only one left in is that middle one. And you can see a little bit of a gap between the bottom of the motor mount and the top of the motor mount. Now, when we let the pressure off that engine, the whole thing will come down just on the passenger side right there. Yeah, here's the water pump. The fins, all this looks fine. But they go bad when they start leaking out of that hole right there. That's when they're bad. There's a plug that goes on here. That plug is eating away. You can tell it's been leaking for a while. I don't know if they're going to give me a new plug, but I'm going to ask for one. Yeah, no, this is not original. You can tell it's the seal is actually still in the engine. I gotta pry that out, and I gotta clean out that groove in the engine and put a new seal and a new one. But yeah, this is Permatex. You can tell this ain't original. Some of these aftermarket water pumps, man, I don't know. Yeah, we're gonna put a new seal back in, and then we're not gonna do like this and get it all over the damn place, but we are gonna use some kind of sealer to create a sight bond, because when you put it back in there, you gotta move it around a little bit, and I don't want it shifting on me. That's the biggest problem. But it's out. Do my best with this. I still need to go out and buy another one for the bottom and a nut to put on the back of it, unless I can find one. These three little knobs are like tiny dowel pins right here. They fit into three little holes on the pulley, and you have to make sure that pulley is seated on there correct, and those knobs are in those holes. Just like that. Then first we're going to drop the engine back down, then we're going to put the belt on, then we're going to tighten up this pulley. And now it's time to put the belt back on. And don't forget, once the belt is back on, you still have to tighten down that pulley. And you only have to tighten it until, the pulley starts turning a little bit, and that will be good enough. That will seat it fine. So once you get the belt on and everything's tightened down, I want you to take a look at the top of this motor mount. You'll see a mark that the washer from the bolts for the motor mount made. See them right around there? This is where you want your bolts to line back up when you pull that engine up, and go ahead and tighten these down. So go ahead and jack the engine up until everything lines up and you can get those bolts smoothly into the holes. Don't go all the way, but go to that far right there and go ahead and start tightening these down, but don't tighten them down all the way. You just want to get them down to the washer and then jack the engine up a little bit further. And continue with that process back and forth until everything's flush, lined up, and very tight. These have to be a little bit over tightened. They should be torqued down. But my torque wrench is broke, so I'm just going to do the best I can. We're going to come back later after the car's been driven around and everything's fine and tight and no leaks. And we're going to re-torque these one more time. And now we're going to reconnect that tube going from the water pump to the radiator. And now we reconnect the air channel. Don't forget that wire in the back that has to be hooked up. Also, don't forget to retighten that drainage plug. Otherwise you're going to put water in, it's just going to pour right out. And we're just going to fill this up with water before we don't want to waste any antifreeze if something's not tight and it's just, pouring out of there, or there's some kind of leak or whatever's going on. We're going to test it with just pure water. Alright, now we're going to put the front wheel back on and we're going to take it off the jack stands. I'm not going to put that plastic rock shield back on yet because I'm still going to get under there one more time and retighten everything after I test drive the car and take care of all that. And now we have to reconnect the battery, and that's always a good sign that you're close to home plate. I went out that night and I test drove the car and I drove it for about 6 or 7 miles and came home and I got up under there and nothing was leaking. Everything's bubbling dry, everything sounds great, the engine quieted down a lot, which was really pretty amazing. And now you see me the following day giving everything a double check and a double tight and just making sure everything is right. I also have to reinstall that rock shield, and I couldn't remember if I had given that pulley one final tighten after I put the belt on, so I'm double checking it now, and it turns out that I did, so that wasn't any problem. We also have to tighten up, we have to make one final check on those motor mounts, because once an engine settles, those tend to loosen up a little bit, and I want to make sure they're as tight as they can get. We also have to put antifreeze in the car. We still haven't done that, so we're going to have to drain all that water out of the radiator and fill it back up with pure 100. I use 100% antifreeze. I don't buy the premix. And once all of the antifreeze is dumped into the radiator, I just refill it with my own water. I'm not paying somebody else for water. And now, before anybody gives me hell, that's pure water draining out on the ground. And now you're going to start the car and you're going to let it warm all the way up. Just let it sit for a while and let the engine warm up. And then you're going to turn on the heater inside the car. And being this is the middle of summer, I'm just going to open up the doors and let all that heat out. Once the thermostat opens up, it will allow more antifreeze into the heater core, which will reduce the amount of antifreeze in the radiator. And that point, you want to top it off. And then put, the radiator cap back on and go test drive it and see what you got. The car is running great, but I did give everything one final check later on that night, and just to close the deal and close this chapter. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. It was not an easy job. Good luck with it. I know you got this. I would advise you to take your time on it and don't rush through. Try not to forget anything because that can lead to a disaster. You'll be happy when you get this done and it's done right. Peace, man.